I love that intro. I can't get enough of it, John. I was just wondering maybe if we could do this live, not just live on the web, but actually live in person, and then just have the camera on you as you're playing that intro. I think that would be so cool.
I'm setting that up actually, so we should be able to do some live piano at some point fairly soon.
Fantastic.
You rarely wait for.
No, I am not in any way, shape, or form wearing. I am absolutely excited to be able to spend some time with you in the real world because I haven't done that since November of last year.
It speaks to the power of virtual communication because I think you and I are more connected than ever, even though we haven't physically laid eyes on each other since our big Indian dinner in November. So
yeah, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's show. I'm Brian Solis. I am coming to you live from Silicon Valley. I had to escape Lake Tahoe because of the smoke density was getting actually worse and worse and worse. Leslie is actually there. So I can't wait to hear how it is today. I was informed that our power was going to be shut down for the day. So we have a makeshift studio going on. So let's just jump right into it because our first guest is already backstage. Let me introduce you to Intersections, a weekly conversational jam where we feature some amazing people that talk about the intersections between culture and technology and innovation and ideas. I'd like to introduce my co-host and co-founder of the show, John Kao. He has been called Mr. Creativity by The Economist. He's a serial innovator. He is just an all-around amazing, talented person. He's taught at Harvard Business. He was also part of MIT Media Lab in Stanford, if I'm not mistaken. He's an incredible musician and composer. He also chairs the Institute for Large-Scale Innovation. John, welcome.
Thanks, Brian. It's always a pleasure. And let me just say that to be on stage with you in this virtual domain is a great pleasure and honor. You know, Brian is a multi-platform virtuoso, best-selling author, obviously a master of this new emerging medium of the internet. He's currently, among other things, the global innovation evangelist for Salesforce. You can only imagine what that is about in terms of all of the different bodies of knowledge that he inhabits. And I think one shared theme between us is that we have an eclectic perspective that somehow seems to dovetail perfectly in terms of it seems to intersect, to use a term of art. So here we are.
I love it. I love it. And I also want to make sure that together, John and I are actually going to be doing more than this show. We're going to be sharing some insights from a lot of these interviews. We're already starting to collect a repository of incredible conversations that we'll be publishing on our respective platforms. So make sure to also follow John on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm connected to him on all of those platforms. And also he has an ongoing column in Forbes, and we'll make sure to share those links. We have a newsletter that we're going to be kicking off here. So Gregarious, if you don't mind popping up that newsletter link, please do subscribe because once we get our act together, we'll be communicating with you well in advance. So with that, I would love to introduce our first guest so we could jump right in. Gabor Burt is actually someone who I sit on a board of directors with, and that's how I believe we were introduced. But also, he is just an incredible person to know and follow. I'll give you his official bio. He is the global authority on reimagining boundaries and the author of the book Slingshot, which is also an incredible framework that I'm sure we'll discuss today. A mastermind of innovation, creativity, and strategy, Gabor enables individuals and organizations to overstep perceived limitations, amen, and to carve out successful growth strategies. His Slingshot framework is at the forefront of global innovation, Gabor, and also probably one of the best hairstyles I have seen in a long time. Intellectual rock star Gabor, welcome to the show.
Wow, that is an incredible introduction. No, it's great to be with you both, and I agree that that introduction you guys produced was really something. So great to be with you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, John, when he sent those tracks over for our intro and outro, I was like, oh man, we got to do this. And we got to do this in the real world. In fact, I could see us on stage with a live audience. That, John, goals. We have things to shoot for. So, Gabor, let's jump right into this because your time is valuable and we don't have enough of it. So, if I'm not mistaken, I think I was originally introduced to some of your work around being one of the co-founding minds around Blue Ocean strategy. So kind of give us an idea of that and then your shift to Slingshot.
Sure. Yeah. So that's right. So I was involved with the Blue Ocean strategy right from the start. In fact, for about 10 years, I was one of the top blue oceanographers and went around the world helping companies understand and apply the concept. And as you know, it was a concept that was incredibly well received. First put out in book form in 2005, precisely because it provided a blueprint for how to navigate this world full of disruption. In fact, the subtitle of the book is Create Your Own Uncontested Market Space, Make the Competition Irrelevant. And that, of course, had a major appeal. But in my work, what was interesting is that while most everybody would love to have the blue ocean space to themselves, in reality, very few companies were able to achieve it. So there was a disconnect between the aspirational blue ocean strategy and what I saw as the practical ability to make it happen. And so my concept, Slingshot, was launched and was born upon this observation. What it talks about is how to reimagine boundaries, how to create blue oceans, in fact, blue waters, in a practical way, and to engage creativity as a corporate resource. And I think with that, the whole idea of creating blue oceans becomes that much more obtainable and practical.
One of the things, John, I'll just jump in before I turn it over to you for, I'm sure, the million questions you already have percolating. You use keyword creativity. I know that Sir Ken Robinson was also a fan of your work and a friend, someone whom I greatly admired, and his platform was about creativity. And it's a key pillar in innovation and transformation, but it's also one of the hardest things to connect with, almost because, as Sir Ken Robinson used to say, it was programmed out of us in our adult life. So how is it that you can at least ignite that creativity so that people feel like they can contribute more than, say, the typical role that they show up with every single day?
Yeah, that's a very central question, and the way that I've approached it is really to get to the core of that, and hence also the symbol that I use for my whole framework, which is Slingshot. And Slingshot is this universal symbol of childhood creativity and playing, and curiosity and exploration. And the whole message is that I think that is an integral part of who we are, and we never lose that. What we lose is the connection to our inner child and our inner creativity. So what we need to do is re-engage with it and then systematically apply it. And that's really what the Slingshot framework is all about. The way that I demonstrate that in my book, for example, is that I had children illustrate the whole book. I had original music that was done to it, so it becomes an immersive experience. And I interviewed eclectic visionaries and asked them questions such as, what evidence do you have that you were once a child? Or what was your favorite game that you ever invented? And it opened up this wonderful just treasure trove of stories that they were never able to tell anyone because no one ever asked them. And it really was the commonality, whether it was Dudley Stokes, who started the Jamaican bobsled team, to Erna Rubik, who invented the Rubik's Cube, to Dave Stewart, one of the iconic musicians. That was the commonality that they all retained and harnessed their creativity in adulthood that led to their success. So I bring those messages. I bring certain triggers to companies and leadership teams that I work with that really allows them to experience the thrill and power of reconnecting with their creativity. And that's kind of the way that I get to it.
Oh, I want to be a client. John?
Well, you're preaching to the choir here. I mean, back in 1984, I launched a course on business creativity at Harvard Business School with the notion that this was kind of the missing fuzzy front end of the whole innovation agenda, which people even at that time were considering to be really, really important. The issue that I've seen over the years is how to make a link between igniting creativity in the pure sense of reimagination and going back to the kind of innocent beginner's mind, et cetera, and the fact that most organizations are hierarchies. They still, participate in industrial culture. They are evidence-based. They are judgmental. And, they might pay a little lip service to the idea of, oh, yeah, we're creative. And usually, in my experience, innovation is kind of the word innovation is kind of a proxy for creativity. It's like the grown-up word for creativity. Yeah, we're innovative because nobody wants to be uninnovative. Yeah. So my question for you, which is one that I've been grappling with these many years, is how do you actually make the bridge between igniting the spark of creativity inside some kind of an established organization and making it meaningful so that it infuses strategy and it infuses larger and sustainable agendas within the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right, that is the key, because until companies look at creativity as something that's abstract, that's not something that's sustainable or systematically applicable, they will not embrace it as a key and core resource. So one of the ways that I do that is that I ask people a 6-question test. And I challenge them and I say that you will not get more than 2 out of these 6 questions correct from the perspective of really future shaping, visionary, strategic thinking. And that gets their attention. And my whole point is that you're operating within self-imposed mental boundaries. So if you can break out of that through the continuous use of creativity and applied imagination, then you have the ability to really shape the future of your market and of course, put yourself on a high growth path and keep you there, keep you in the blue waters. And that has worked really well. And these 6 questions are incredibly simple, but they really bring to the surface those self-imposed boundaries. The questions include, what business are you in? Who do you think are your most important competitors? What do you think should be the goal of innovation? Things like that. And I have found that really does ignite this sort of path, because companies, as you say, are just too focused on efficiency, on internal processes, rather than really looking outward. And this makes that switch possible.
Well, I love the fact that you say up front that they'll probably get only at most 2 out of 6, because you're kind of giving them a narcissistic injury that kind of makes them want to pay extra attention to you. So I think that's really smart. Yet, the question of, you can have a unit inside a big company or a big government organization that's the blue ocean cell, and they can come up with all kinds of great ideas. But the issue is injecting it into the mainstream without having it be killed off or dismissed or lip serviced or whatever. So what about that larger organizational issue of, really implanting it so that it has impact?
Right. Well, it starts with the top. So what is good in terms of the timing for this topic is that it's irrefutable that there is a whole major shift in leadership, in culture, in the way organizations are built and function. And we see such amazing success stories, whether it's Amazon or Virgin or any of the others, where this is actually steeped in culture throughout the organization. In fact, we see people like Richard Branson or John Laguerre, who recently stepped down as the CEO of telecom in the U.S. That they're embracing humor. So they're actually that as a manifestation of creativity, to say that even humor has a place in leadership. So there's, I think, a significant shift, but it does start with the top down. And I work with companies where that is actually either already the case or is activated through our work together. And once that happens, then it can permeate throughout the organization and not just be an isolated department.
Gabor, let me ask you something about these interesting times in which we live, which is we're witnessing radical transformation in which many businesses were struggling to keep up with to begin with. And by many, I'll just say legacy and incumbents. We've seen 10 years of e-commerce adoption and acceleration happen in 3 months. We've seen 75% of consumers experiment with new brands in the last 3 months, with 60% saying that they're going to stick with their new brands. We're watching behavior shift over the 66-day period of which it takes to make behaviors automatic. So the sense of innovation and creativity could never be more important.
Yeah.
And I wonder, how many times do you see, or are you seeing here now and in the future, the opportunity to introduce a new question into the set, which is, what business are you not in where your consumers are evolving, or their needs that they don't necessarily know they need yet are that trajectory is going out there? What do you see for the possibility of creating new business innovation?
Yeah, I think this is an amazing time, and I love the quote by the former or a Nobel Prize-winning economist Frommer, who said a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and I deeply feel that this is a moment in time where everything is being redrawn. It's a new beginning. A new environment is being shaped, and therefore every company has the ability to shape the future of its market space, to redefine its customers' journeys, et cetera. And you're right; it's also about what you are willing to let go. One of the trends you mentioned, a few interesting facts and trends and transitions during this few months. One of the ones that I find most amusing and maybe even most telling is that Walmart is reporting that they're selling overwhelmingly more upper garments than lower garments, right? Everybody's only visible from the
possibly do you mean?
Yeah. So, and perhaps even within us, I don't know who's wearing what, underneath, but it's really remarkable. And to me, it's an exciting time. Obviously, that's not to discount all the difficulty and suffering. That's all real. But what is also real is the other side, that's full of opportunities. So yeah, Brian, when I work with the leadership teams, we do get into those conversations, and I do see that they are much more receptive because they have no choice but to come face to face with the reality that what they're doing now, how they define their business, their marketplace, innovation, is just no longer sustainable.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. John, let's wind down with one more question.
Sure. So in our remaining moment here, I'm really curious about the music. I noticed that you have a soundtrack for your intellectual capital, and it's available on SoundCloud, and I'm intrigued about how you view music in terms of your work.
Yeah, no, I thank you for asking, and I love the fact that you have that musical background and how you incorporate that into corporate and leadership messages. But my intent was the same. I just think that music is a beautiful, global platform to get across messages and emotions and of course creative expression. And so when I put my book together, I was thinking of making it, and in fact, turning it into an immersive experience as a way of demonstrating the concepts that are in the book. And so I found this incredibly talented European band that got excited about the concepts of my book, and they created original music for each chapter. So when someone reads it, they can actually be stimulated in multiple ways and hopefully retain the messages even better.
Well, I'm inspired. That's fantastic.
That's very, very cool. Well, Gabor, we could talk to you all day, and we'll probably have you back on the show if you're open to it. Always enjoy our conversations, and I also enjoy our collaboration. So thank you very much for your friendship and your partnership. Gabor, rock and roll. John, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our next guest.
So we are fortunate, very fortunate, to have. We're talking about Susie Ellis, correct?
We are the one and only,
the inimitable Susie Ellis. So I've had the pleasure of working with Susie off and on for over a decade. She is a major force in what, for lack of more specific language, we're calling the global wellness, maybe the global well-being movement. She is the founder and chair of both the Global Spa and Wellness Summit, which is the most influential gathering place for people in this evolving industry, this multi-trillion-dollar industry, as it moves from hot stone massages to rather profound questions of well-being in schools and workplaces, et cetera, and is also the chair and founder and CEO of the Global Wellness Institute, which is now known for being the leader and standard setter in research and thoughtful strategic consideration of what wellness needs to be in society. I'm privileged to be on the advisory board of the Global Wellness Institute, and Susie is recognized as a pioneer in terms of advancing the notion of wellness and putting it into the world in which we live in now, which is not just about, again, getting your hot stone massage, but really considering deeply what well-being and wellness means in your life. So welcome, Susie.
Welcome, Susie.
Hi, John, and hello, Brian. Nice to be with you both. Good to see you again, John.
You have an amazing setting for our conversation. It looks like you're about to take off for the high seas.
Well, speaking of creativity, this is what I call my floating office. Mm-hmm. And what it is that my husband likes boating. And so this is a compromise because, you can work from anywhere now these days. And so I told him I'll go with him wherever, but there needs to be good internet access. I need to be able to work. And so that's how we do it. And I happen to be in Key Largo. We took the boat from Fort Lauderdale to Key Largo today.
So a trendsetter, as always, in this, as other things. So I want to get right to it because I know that one of the subjects on your mind and also on the mind of the forthcoming Global Spa and Wellness Summit is the whole notion of resetting and redefining the notion of wellness for the world in which we live. And I wonder if you could say a bit about what you mean by that and also where wellness is going. Maybe those of us in the audience are in need of a crisper and more accurate and more meaningful definition. And I know that's something you've been thinking about a lot.
Yes, well, John, when we met, I think it was over 10 years ago, there really, I would say, was no wellness industry. I mean, we used the word spa. In fact, we started as the Global Spa Summit and, places where people kind of renewed their body, mind, spirit. But we weren't using the word wellness. Many people probably can think back 10 years ago and, it wasn't something a lot of people used. But we found, and we do research at the Institute, that it was a term that was resonating with people because, spa has a little bit of an elitist feel to it. And so not everybody was relating to that. But wellness was something the medical profession and governments and companies, even schools, could start relating to. And so we did the research and really introduced the term to the point where it's become very widely used. And so we look at the global wellness economy. And one of the things that we did at the Institute is that we put numbers to this. We worked with a research firm, SRI International, and now we have our own researchers at the Institute. So we've put numbers behind it. And as we put these numbers out and we gave them all away for free, people recognize, this is a big deal. The overall global wellness industry or economy, I should say, is 4.5 trillion. And underneath that, you have workplace wellness, you have wellness real estate, you have the beauty industry, you have spas, thermal and mineral springs, that sort of thing. There's actually 10 sectors that we've identified. This year, we're going to add a 11th sector, which is mental wellness, which is something more and more talked about. So people were starting to pay attention to this. Wellness tourism is another big bubble that just sort of, became something that people started recognizing that you could travel to improve your health. So wellness now is something a lot of people talk about. Well-being is another term that's often used interchangeably with wellness. And what we have found with this pandemic, and maybe even before the pandemic, because I think the pandemic has accelerated a lot of things that were already happening, is that we're seeing that now is an opportunity to reset. And that's actually the theme of our summit, which we are going to be doing in November in person, and we'll have a little bit of a virtual component, but we are really going to gather. And the theme is resetting the world with wellness.
And what does that mean to you, to reset the world with wellness, given our kind of disrupted times?
Well, I'll tell you what it means to me, and it's going to be a part of the discussion at the summit. But, you know, wellness has been, and even well-being, a little bit of a fuzzy word in terms of definitions. In fact, most people have their own definition of what wellness means. However, what has happened and what we're seeing in our research, and let me give you an example of why we're seeing that more people are paying attention to this. About 5 months ago, when the pandemic started, the Pope was looking at the future in terms of health and felt like there needs to be a new vision for health. It can't be the same as it's always been. And so he started, you know, looking at different ways to look at it. And he got in touch with us about adding the whole prevention part to health and looking at wellness. So the idea of wellness and the medical community and healthcare coming together, that's to me what I'm seeing. But here's what I feel the terminology is that will be resonating. We'll test this out at the summit. But we're seeing that when I talk to people, they do understand that there is healthcare. You know, every country has some kind of healthcare, whether it's good or not. But there is healthcare. That's doctors and medical and hospitals and so on. But there's also self-care. There's also what people do, what I do, what you do. If we exercise, if we take vitamins, if we're eating healthfully, if we're getting good sleep. So the combination is what's really the whole. Healthcare has its place, and self-care is what all the 8 billion people that live on the earth can do. And we need now, especially with what's happening with the pandemic, we need all of that to work. The healthcare can't do everything, and self-care can only do so much. But individuals have to do their part. Prevention is part of it, and healthcare together. That to me is what will be a reset. And the good part about that is that the medical profession is reacting very positively to that, whereas the medical profession was not always embracing the term wellness, because for some people that meant, you know, complementary and alternative and that sort of thing.
You know, I love what you said about, well, the Pope got in touch with us because we, you know, had these ideas about wellness. And I know that you've been involved with the World Economic Forum and governments have been contacting you. So this is not a minor issue. And, you know, I guess when you think about the stewardship of, you know, the Catholic Church or your country or the World Economic Forum agenda, wellness and well-being have to be part of the purpose of what we're all here for, right? I mean, the healthcare profession up until now has been mostly concerned with preventing disease, and you know, but wellness is a layer on top of it. Wellness is not the absence of disease. Wellness is about fulfilling our complete potential, you know, body, mind, and spirit, in a sense. And so, pulling these things together, it seems to me, is a very significant part of what you've been up to. So, hey, Brian, you know, I want to make sure that we get sort of, we both get our cracks at Susie here. What has this been kind of stimulating for you in terms of your thoughts?
Excuse me, John, can I just jump in with one thing?
Sure.
You mentioned one thing that I'm going to respectfully disagree with,
Okay.
that the medical community has been, you know, concerned about prevention and so on. I think that's actually not what they've been concerned about. They've been concerned more about curing and, you know, doing, you know, surgery and giving out, you know, medications and so on. Understandably so. They don't have a lot of time to, you know, to spend with people. So, and the whole prevention thing is not easy. So I think the medical community, just like with COVID, they, you know, if somebody gets COVID, they, you know, they're there and they want to do a vaccine and they want to, you know, help and cure. And that's very important. But that self-care part, you know, having a strong immune system, making sure you don't have all these underlying, you know, diseases, obesity, diabetes and so on. That's the part that's, really difficult. But I think the healthcare system now is really embracing wanting help with that. And so I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to, I just wanted to add that.
I think we agree. I mean, I think up until now, the profession of healthcare and medicine hasn't gotten paid for preventive medicine. Right. You get
exactly.
paid for doing surgery and prescribing medication. But I think this more holistic view is about a larger view of economic well-being as well.
Exactly.
That brings up a good point, because a friend of mine, Dr. Molly, had attempted to open up a proactive preventative care practice shortly before COVID. And one of the things that she found is something that I had found in my research. It's just quick background, and this to also address a question that came in from Jose with Social Dilemma, for example, the Netflix documentary that's out. The last few years I've spent studying the impacts of digital's relationship on our brain, our body, our emotions, our psyche. And I was frightened and inspired by the research over the last few years. But one of the things that I had learned, and that's specifically about writing a book about how to practice self-care in a world where digital is rewiring every part of your body, how to practice wellness, how to practice self-love. I found that the conversation was incredibly complex, because you're essentially walking into a bar at 2:30 in the morning and asking people if they want to join Alcoholics Anonymous. It's something that people don't necessarily realize, that their relationship with likes and followers and this whole new digital world, that wellness actually is more important than it's ever been. I'll give you a quick example. I did some research with a global luxury beauty brand, and my task was to study just how much women were changing their own views of beauty, their self-beauty, and how they were affected by their relationship with social media on self-esteem, confidence, and self-love. And it was devastating just how much, first, the impact of how great it is, but also just how few people actually are aware that they are being changed. So, Susie, I'd love to hear in your work and in your research, how we as just human beings need to think differently about our own relationship with self-care, wellness, self-love, and all of the above.
Well, I think you make a very good point, and the research is showing that mental wellness, and that is a term that hasn't been used a lot. Most people talk about mental health, and especially now, people are much more cognizant of, here we have COVID, and people are isolated, and there's all kinds of things happening that are affecting people mentally. And so there is, and certainly the digital, issues with Social Dilemma, which I started watching last night, that is a big part of, it's not a matter of going out and exercising. It's a matter of prioritizing, separating work from home, giving oneself time off, and understanding that there's an addictive part. So this whole idea of mental wellness, again, when we've introduced that term, and I mentioned, we do a big research study every year. Catherine Johnston and Ophelia Young are researchers, and they are fantastic. They've done 10 projects for us. And this year is on mental wellness. It's going to come out in November at our summit. They spend an entire year, and this is exactly what they're studying. And by the way, we did a session, we do wellness masterclasses with Euromonitor yesterday, and they showed that they were looking at different generations and what they prioritized in terms of their health. And for every single generation, mental health was at the top. We've never seen that. But I think there's just a lot of more attention, and it's going to take some education. And again, there are things people can do that are preventative. I mean, exercise makes a difference. Eating well, sleeping, having stress reduction, and having the social interaction. Things that are healthy are becoming more talked about. And then the whole thing with mental health, depression and anxiety. These are things now that are much more talked about. So I think first there's education, and even, what's the word? Transparency. I mean, when I'm watching Social Dilemma, I mean, I'm rather surprised at some of the things that I'm learning.
Yeah. Yes, John. Just real quick, I'll just close out that it's a practice that not everybody's aware of. That there's a reason why we change as a result of our relationship with a lot of these networks and games and devices. It's actually a technique called persuasive design that is used in a variety of ways to change behaviors. But what they didn't study, which I think is a big opportunity for you and the Institute, is what are the long-term effects of that, and then how does it change the relationship you have with yourself, let alone this image that you have that you portray to the world. So it's a big opportunity, I think, for you and for all of us to learn. John, I think I'll turn it back to you in closing.
Well, there's so much that we could talk about, but I think this lays a framework, and I'm sure the audience out there shares our abiding interest in the things that the Global Wellness Institute and that the summit are engaged with. So I just want to point out that there is something called the wellnessevidence.com website, which is a compilation of evidence-based research that documents the impact of various wellness practices. There's the Global Wellness Institute website with tons of downloadable content. And this is pioneering work. So we are so happy that you were able to join us. And I think that as the work continues, maybe after the summit or something, we'll want to get a follow-up and find out if, in fact, the world really did get reset around wellness. So
great, and we'd like to have you help us reset the world with wellness. It's something the world needs.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for being here, Susie. And
thank you, Susie.
We'll
thank
see
you, Brian.
around. Okay. Ciao.
All right. So before we bring on our next guest, I do want to send a shout out to Leslie. Leslie, Gregarious would love it if you could reshare your screen feed. It dropped off so that we could bring you back into the show. Otherwise, John, maybe send her a text as well in case she can't hear us.
I will take care of that right now.
Also, I am just blown away. One, John, we should have taken that show not just to your place for live piano, but to her boat. That looked like a great place.
Cool, huh?
To broadcast from.
One of our criteria for guests, in the future is going to be where they're coming in live from, and we'll give prizes for the most exotic location.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So everybody who's following along, please make sure to leave a comment, ask your questions, share where you're tuning in from. We have guests from all over the world. Our next guest is Cathy Hackl. Let's bring her on. Cathy, I'm just talk about timing. This is a perfect time to have you on the show, but let me give you a formal introduction. She's a fellow futurist, speaker, author, globally recognized expert in augmented reality, virtual reality, spatial computing. I'm a big fan of spatial design, and one of these days we'll have to geek out over that in terms of this idea of designing for physical and digital worlds where they come together. And I think you've been, I don't even know how many years now, a top tech voice on LinkedIn. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Love the color of your blazer, by the way. And let's just jump in, Cathy. So I've heard that things have been incredibly quiet in the AR VR space. So if we have anything to talk about, maybe we could start with the fact that a couple little companies, Apple and Facebook, started talking about this week.
What a giant thanks for having me on the show. It's just been a giant week for the AR VR industry. This week has just been, oh my goodness, massive. I do feel like I need to up my location game next time I'm on the show. So I don't know, maybe I'll be on a Costa Rican waterfall or something. I don't know. I can't top Susie's location, but what a crazy week with virtual reality and augmented reality. I've been part of the industry for 5 years, worked with HTC Vive, Magic Leap most recently, which we can talk about a little bit. But yeah, we had Facebook Connect this week, launching new headsets, talking to the world about the augmented reality glasses they are working on, finally showing, it's not even a prototype. They said, the glasses they showed are not even a prototype, but they are more a research vehicle for what they're attempting to do to map the world one-on-one. And it's really interesting because I had been referring to the moment that we get these glasses, these augmented reality glasses that look fashionable, as the Ray-Ban moment. Mm-hmm. And Facebook announced a partnership with Ray-Ban. So I had a lot of people reaching out, like, you called it. I was like, I had no idea it was going to be Ray-Ban. I just kind of used a brand. But yeah, it's been quite a week for virtual reality and augmented reality.
Yeah, well, it could have been Bose in terms of crossing over, and instead they pulled out of their audio augmented reality endeavor. But let's talk about this, because we had Brian Rommel on last week, who shared that his vision for a voice first world. We see sort of voice first happening here in terms of how you control the smart glasses. I can't. Remind me of the name of the prototype that it was. Project. It'll
For
come to me in a
Bose?
second. No, the Facebook glasses that they
Aria.
Aria,
Project
yes.
Aria. Project
Aria.
Yeah.
Thank you. They, for those who don't know, they look like glasses. Very cool glasses. But what you're essentially doing is experiencing an augmented world in real time. So where you are, of course, you see your directions, but you also see information about where you are popping up, and you can interact with it in real time, which is fascinating. But what we're starting to see is this greater concept of the fact that smartphones and tablets are pretty much plateaued. So we're sort of at that bell curve, coming down, and the next one coming up. And I think you've been one of the champions for AR and VR, sort of being that next bell curve. So with that said, what can we expect as users if augmented reality in whatever paradigm becomes that sort of next device? What does the world look like, I guess, quite literally in that front?
I mean, the world becomes clickable, searchable, likable, which obviously talking about the social dilemma has a totally other aspect if the world becomes likable. But basically, it's that merging of the digital and the physical, bringing it together. And it's pretty much. And I talk about this. I've written for Forbes. I wrote a whole series for them on the metaverse. Some people call it AR cloud. Some people call it live maps. Facebook uses that term. Magically, we used to call it the Magicverse, but it's pretty much that digital copy, one-to-one, that is updatable, as we, in real time of the world. So moving beyond just like the concept of the digital twin, but it's an actual digital, let's say, living copy of the world where this content is placed. So, it's putting on those glasses, and instead of, having to look down and look at things, you're going to be looking up. The information is going to be in front of you, and you're going to be processing in a totally different way. So, what can users expect? I mean, it's going to take some time for that to happen. You have to have networks. You have to have, the glasses need to be constantly scanning the world and updating it, because of, if you want content that is persistent and content that is spatially aware, it has to be constantly scanning the world to be able to know, if someone moved a chair, or if someone stepped into the conversation, what have you. So it'll be interesting. I think one of the big things that they said yesterday and that they touched on was the audio, right? And you mentioned Bose, and I think audio, I mean, I'm already using my AirPods, right? That's one of the ways that we're starting to embrace this kind of augmentation of our hearing. And we're always so focused on the visuals, but it really starts here and it connects here. And then obviously it goes to the, there's brain machine interface and all that fun stuff that I'm sure we can talk about, and we probably need another show for that. But yeah, what can users expect? I mean, they're going to be able to click on the world or save information about a place and break free of screens. So it's a totally different interaction with digital content, if you think about it.
I have a couple questions, John, and I'm sure you do as well. One thing that I started thinking about yesterday during the Facebook Connect event, and then also thinking about the teases that we saw from Apple as well, in terms of what's to come from their front. The notion of trust hit home. We're living in a time where Facebook is the word struggling with trust is probably not even going to capture it, right? It's almost like they have to re-earn consumer trust. And so how likely is it of a company who makes a device that's incredibly aware in an entirely new dimension? What does Facebook need to think about? And then I'm sure Apple's already thinking about this, because Apple is a trusted brand. How does this change the human dynamics of social contract that we have with these types of devices moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, so critical to what's coming next with VR and AR is having those frameworks set up. For example, I think it was last week, the XRSI released a framework for privacy when it comes to the AR cloud, right? So it's just a framework, nothing necessarily binding, but it's kind of a step in the right direction. And what I did notice during yesterday's presentation with Facebook was that they talked about privacy. I think they're obviously hyper aware of the situation and how it could be seen. So these are the conversations we need to have right now. I wrote another article for Forbes as well, as like, we need to take this seriously. Like, this is a full augmentation of the world. So if we don't want the things that have happened in social media, let's say, or in the internet, to be brought into this other digital space, we need to set up those kind of frameworks and those responsibilities, especially when you're tracking. I think the big thing for me is, having tried all these technologies, when you're doing eye tracking, you're tracking voice, you're tracking their gait, you're tracking, how, where they're going. You're tracking so much intimate data that I think that is going to be one of the things that needs to be resolved or talked about from the get-go. Because what are these companies going to do with all that data that they're collecting from, they're already, collecting data from how you use your phone and how you look. Obviously, in the social dilemma, they talk about that. But they're going to be collecting even more data, where you're looking, your tone of voice, like I said, how you walk. Those are things that are just going to be really important to have conversations about. So I do applaud companies like the AI Foundation, which I'm sure you guys have heard of, which has already been thinking about trust in the deepfake world. And they have this idea and this concept of, it is important for all of us to own our own AI, so our own virtual interpretation and digitalization of ourselves. So, I do applaud those efforts for people that are already trying to work and figure that out.
Well, John, I'll turn it over to you. But before I do that, I just got an ad on my Facebook stream for the new Apple AR glasses just from this conversation. I'm just kidding, by the way. But we've seen just in closing here, this is a bigger conversation that we probably need to continue, because we've already seen what today's data can do when used against us, and we saw that in the last election, and it's incredibly profound of what you can know about someone and how you can engage someone in really compelling ways. So, John, over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Well, I've a VR question and an AR question. So the VR question has to do with the future of collaboration. Right now, we're in this kind of distributed virtual world in an accelerated way, and we're going to stay there to a significant degree after the pandemic subsides. And so, what is the reality going to be in terms of VR's ability to enhance collaboration? Zoom obviously got a big boost from the pandemic. I suppose if we had VR that didn't mess with your inner ear and that was intuitive in the way that Zoom has been intuitive and charming, we might be able to have virtual meetings and virtual experiences that would be even better than, my 15-year-old calls e-school watching TV all day. And there's some truth to that. It's fatiguing and it's non-intuitive. So that's the VR question. The AR question is, I get that when you're wearing whose ever glasses, you're going to be roaming around and information will pop up and so forth and so on. And that's kind of neat. But it lacks an organizing principle in a way, and a sense of, well, who's the curator of this? And so I'm wondering where information architecture and privileged environments and actually curation of clusters of experience are going to relate to AR, and whether that creates new business models. So sorry, those are two kind of complicated questions, but
no, it's great. Great. And I'll start with the last one, just because I was having that conversation yesterday with one of the founders of Meow Wolf, which you guys probably know, right? And we're talking about the idea and the concept of spatial programming, spatial with a T, spatial programming, right? Because Meow Wolf is very focused on spatial programming, whether it's a physical space or a digital space. So we're talking about, how in some ways, when you think about these technologies and unlocking them, back in the day, people were, the internet's never going to affect me. I don't need a website, right? That's what a lot of people heard. And then there was this race to create the website and add e-commerce and add this, or the race to better understand social media. And in some way, we possibly will be seeing something like that when it comes to spatial programming in location. So if I'm wearing the glasses and I'm going into the restaurant and I go into the restaurant and there's no spatial programming for me that I am expecting, like that is a question, and that's something that brings up a new potential business model, right? So when I get the questions like, this is all for big tech, this is not for small business, it's like, no, wait a second. Like you have to understand the fundamental change that is happening here. We're moving away from the phone into the glasses and then other stuff in the future. So, the same challenges that you face with people on mobile are the challenges you're going to face. You're going to have to ask these questions. How do you get people in the door? How do you engage people when they're in your restaurant, in your, in your small store or shopping? So I think that brings up the whole question of spatial programming. And also to that, John, the concept of human-centered design, which I know Brian is really interested in, is, I think, critical when designing these technologies, right? We're in some way, with the AR cloud and with this world, we're going to be kind of coming head to head with the machine. So the machine is going to be able to read the world, right, that we live in, and we are going to navigate this world with digital content, and we're going to kind of come face to face. So I think that that's going to be a really interesting paradigm.
There's this concept of memory palaces, and this Jesuit priest went to China, and he took a whole curriculum and imagined this sort of mental architecture that defined all of these different disciplines. And I'm sort of imagining that information architecture plus AR equals new ways of learning and experiencing that lead to really interesting businesses potentially. Yeah. You seem to sense that same possibility.
Definitely. I mean, if currently in the current situation, if I could have Mary Curie teach my kids chemistry, even though she's an avatar, or I would love that, because I'm having a really hard time dealing with virtual school with my kids. So if I could have, Socrates, or, teach philosophy or what have you, whether it's in an AR format or virtual reality, like that would just make a huge, huge difference. So access to the best teachers in the world, right? So definitely, I think there's a lot there. And then you asked about collaboration in the virtual realm. There's already things that you can do, and it really depends on your comfort with virtual reality. Obviously, I'm the type of person that spends a lot of hours a week in VR. So I don't really get motion sickness or anything like that. Vection doesn't really affect me. But what I would say is there's already tools in there. There's Spatial, which is one of the companies that I really like, that I've been using in my Magic Leap and in my Oculus Quest to have meetings. So there's already these tools being created. And I think the key there is for them to be cross-platform, so that, and a lot of them are where I'm in my VR headset or in my Magic Leap, you can be on your computer and we can all have this meeting and manipulate a 3D asset or work on a spreadsheet or whatever. So definitely, I think that's something that is really hot right now. But I think it's something that is going to stay with us. It's not going to kind of die off. It'll stay with us for a long time, because it just, there's nothing better than if you're working on a 3D asset to be able to actually have it in your reality and see it in 3D instead of trying to see it on a flat screen. So
I'd like to ask you about just a secondary question on that, to John's point. Facebook did demonstrate yesterday an office environment, a virtual office environment, one of which is an individual experience, but also one that's a collaborative experience. And then also we saw sort of I don't know if it was an official tease or an introduction of new hardware to kind of go along with this sort of spatial computing aspect of bringing users into the virtual world, but also still having real world capabilities. For example, Logitech with the keyboard and trackpad. So the one thing, I'll just kind of throw it out there and couch this as a skeptic and an optimist, is that one thing that AR and VR has lacked over the years wasn't imagination, but a killer app, something that was going to pull people in and just completely transform them overnight, and much in the same way that the iPhone did back in the day with Palm and Trio, and those were life-changing devices, but also because they had a back end of human experience design tied to it, where they were thinking through things that were going to transform you, much in the same way that we saw going back to Social Dilemma with how Facebook and Instagram and TikTok change you. So what are you seeing maybe with this virtual office environment or what you might know that we don't know that start to become these killer apps?
I always get asked that, and I think until they don't provide true utility, right, and solve a real pain point, they're not going to be massively adopted, right? And I think that, people want to focus on the pandemic as this like pivotal moment in VR. And in some ways it is. And it's a very important moment in the industry, but it's not the end all be all. We kind of have to keep working at it. What I would say is with the demo, with the infinite office that you saw, that is called pass through. So I enjoy pass through. I think it's fine. That's pretty much, I'm wearing my virtual reality headset and I'm using the cameras to see outside the real world, right? I like pass through. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be something that I want to do when I'm working every day. I think glasses is going to be, kind of a lot more effective in that matter. So we'll have to see. The one thing I'm excited about is kind of those interfaces and inputs that you're going to be able to use, whether it's a keyboard or whether it's just using, one of the bracelets or brain machine interface. Like I've tested about 4 or 5 of those devices already. The external ones, I have to say, I do not have a link in my head. I do not need an implant. But the external devices that have allowed me to do things like scroll an iPad with my mind or turn on lights. And I see true utility there, especially now for people that might have a disability. So, these tools will allow them to have access to more opportunities, more jobs, because they'll be able to use these technologies to augment themselves in some way. So there is the positive, let's say, side of the coin, and there's the not necessarily so positive. But as an industry, as a member of the industry, I say we have to keep working really hard at it. We have to keep proving the value of using virtual reality and augmented reality to solve real world issues.
I love it. John, anything you want to throw out there in closing?
I hope you'll come back because I have so many more questions.
Yeah, and happy to come back in an avatar from Facebook, from Horizon, or we'll see. Let's do something fun. Maybe like one of those demos. I'll scroll my iPad with my mind next time.
Wow. Wow.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds like a deal. Very cool. Well, thank you very much for being on the show, Cathy. It was a privilege and a big fan of your work and your thinking.
Yeah.
John, I got to tell you, this is just we're going to need to launch a second show just to have
the satellite show, the after show.
Exactly, the after shows. Wow. Paul, I just want to let you know that I saw your question. I threw it up on the screen. We'll probably have to have a show dedicated to that. I mean, in many ways, in my research, and it's one of the inspirations for LifeScale, was we are kind of becoming a zombie society. Creativity is at risk, and we don't necessarily see it as a loss of creativity because a lot of our technologies sort of give us the semblance that we are being more creative. But that's a subject for another time. So thank you for the question. John, what do you want to say on that?
And also, I think that it ties together our 3 guests today because, we had this notion of the importance of creativity that kicked us off and, the kind of creative spirit, if you will. And then we had this notion of well-being as expressing human potential and mental wellness and not just the absence of distress, but doing something really great. And that led us to this kind of cusp of, how is the technology going to be affecting us? And the question that Paul raised and that you just referenced, which is, if we slide the relationship between technology and the human drastically, are we doing ourselves a favor, or are we doing the slider switch over to offloading our human ability to create in ways that are ultimately going to lead to that Pixar, that movie WALL-E, where we're all sitting around watching television all day and eating snack food and being massaged by our mobile couches, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, it's actually, it reminds me, I need to rewatch that movie. So everybody, thank you so much. Thank you to our guests. John, you're I love listening to your imagination work in real time and your questions. You can see your brain sort of coming to life. So I very much enjoy these moments.
Vice versa.
Everyone, we hope you'll join us next week. Leslie, we're sorry we lost your feed. I cannot wait to see the visuals from the last 2 conversations. They're going to be incredible. We'll be blogging this at some point once we get our act together. John, send us out.
All right, here we